What's a dinosaur's favourite drink? Rex on the beach. Naturally. Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. Today I'm going to be responding to a comment that I got in my last video. I'll do a quick wristwatch check. Wearing the Squire T183. I can never remember. I should know this by now. I call it the Forged Carbon 1521 because it's based on that case, and it is on a Waffle Wrist Candy Watch Club. I swapped it out because, well, you guys know I love these straps. It's the same strap on my Panerai, so I get the same comfort there. Anyway, wristwatch check done. Now, I also have been thinking a lot about that last video as well. So I received a really interesting comment from a chap called Michael, who I see as a regular commentator, so I got to thank him for this. This comment, which I'll post on the screen, there was a lot in it. There's multiple points made, so I'm going to go through it and address each part. So the first thing he said was TGV really does not like Tissot. That's not true. I've owned many Tissot. In fact, actually the first Swiss watch I ever owned was a Tissot, beautiful chronograph. For the life of me, I cannot remember the name or the reference. I think it was a PRX something. It was a quartz kind of racing with a slightly scalloped bezel, bit of a Breitling-esque bezel, beautiful piece. And I think I had the blue dial. I think it was a Sunray, long time ago. And then of course I had the Tissot, the Janeiro in the early days of the channel, amazing timepiece. That was way ahead of its time, very prescient of trends. It came out in the mid-90s, but yet was 37 millimeters, vintage inspired before the vintage inspired trend was even a thing. So very, very ahead of its time chronograph by Tissot, and I loved it. Extremely rare. I think there's only like 3,000 or so made. Every day I regret selling that piece, but I sold it because it went towards funding my wife's Datejust, and that to me gives me much more pleasure, her owning that beautiful timepiece. So I made the sacrifice. Basically, I put some money into it, sold that, and got her the Datejust. So anyway, I adore Tissot. I think the distinction is I don't like what they're doing. And that is a big difference, and I'll get into that in just a moment. I wrote down in my notes pure class about that Tissot. Of course, you know, they're very rare. The price is, I don't know, doubled in that time, but anyway. The high-tech escapement, I think, is false advertising. The only thing high-tech about it is the mechanized way it's produced. A big mistake. It works in some watches, like for example, when Hamilton utilized that movement, in field watches, in utilitarian watches, absolutely fine. But in smarter watches like the Gentleman or the PRX, I don't think it works. I think it's just blatant cost cutting, and the way they kind of sell it to you like it's some great new thing, when really cutting the watchmaker out the most expensive part of watchmaking. And I think this is going to have a detrimental effect. For example, you remember my Hanhart tour in Germany. Did you notice how all the watchmakers were young guys? They hire from a local watchmaking school, they support young talent. If you cut out more watchmakers, and there's a definite deficit of watchmakers, and that's going to have detrimental effects to the industry. They think like a corporation. They put profit first, meeting that quarterly, you know, projections and goals and all that. They don't think like long term. And that is typically what you get with corporations. And that is why I adore brands like, you know, Squire and Hanhart and all these other brands, that you get to know them, that there's a family behind it. And that comes across. They care about it because it's putting food on their table, and they see the longevity. It's a generational thing. Andrea Maggi, the Squire owner, he grew up with Von Buren, you know. I don't want this to turn into a rant about how wonderful Squire is. You know, it's a brand close to my heart. But when there's a personal stake involved, when it's, you know, it's not just people within the giant corporation collecting a paycheck. What happens when there's less watchmakers? You're going to have the issue where servicing your watch, finding a qualified watchmaker, there's not going to be enough of them, and the costs are going to skyrocket. And when the Swiss watchmaking empire falls, and it will fall again, just like the quartz crisis, we're seeing the smartwatches just crushing it in terms of sales. Okay, there's that argument where it is getting some people into wearing watches again, but really, what is that transfer rate? What is the significant, what is the benefits? You know, the only brands, I've talked about this endlessly, is G-Shock really doing something about it. And you've got others like Frédéric Constant, blah, blah, blah. I've discussed all this, but there is a crisis happening. This kind of short-term thinking does not help that. And I want to see Tissot succeed. I want to see them do more affordable watches that are more accessible, but I don't want them to take shortcuts in doing so, and with the false advertising, it's dishonest. I wrote here, I wouldn't be surprised if the Germans and Japanese took over. I really wouldn't. Okay, he goes on to say, yet who gives props to Seiko and Citizen because of their higher-end offers, despite tons of lower quality movement and cheap non-sapphire crystal glass and poor QC. Listen, I've been the first person to call out Seiko on their QC issues. My Alpinist with the internal bezel, the review I did, even the Willard I did last year that I still ended up pulling the trigger on, because there are other things that make up for it. I don't talk about Citizen that much in terms of Citizen. I talk about their wider, the group more so, but I think Miyota, and I do think now they have, let me get the name right, Gentry, the Swiss hybrid that I recently talked about. I think they do a better job, certainly, than the entry-level Swiss. What have I written here? Also, the Swiss-Japanese is a bit of a tricky dichotomy to analyze because they both approach mass production watchmaking very, very differently. I think it is an oversimplification, you know, apples and oranges and all the rest. And yeah, you're right with the lack of sapphire. I'm a fan of hardlex. Again, that's more personal preference. So yeah, I see your point, but it really depends on the watch. It depends on the brand. It's tricky just to generalize. I think that's the general message here. Also, QC, you've got to buy the seller as well. Mark, for example, I know he inspects watches probably better than any other entry-level seller I've experienced. I'm not saying he's infallible. Everyone makes mistakes, but I know he personally checks watches a lot more than other sellers. Other sellers, they just get stock in and it's out in one door, out the other. You know, they don't care. So reputable, trustworthy sellers, and that's what you pay for. Now, I understand if you judged my opinion based on that one video alone, then you're only going to get a partial view or a partial understanding of my opinion, because my opinion is, you know, you have to be a really avid OG or original Gentry viewer to really get my standpoint, because it's over several videos, it's not just in one video. Okay, so he went on to say, people forget Tissot is entry level to the Swiss brands, and while some of its selections aren't for everyone, it offers good quality at a reasonable price. Now, I agree totally with the latter point of that statement. Absolutely, very, very true. Like I said, I've owned several Tissots in the past. It was my gateway into Swiss watches. I didn't start out with a Rolex and an Omega, that came later. The first bit, he says, people forget Tissot is entry level to the Swiss brands. Did you not see the history section of my PRX to a comparison with the, what was it, the Nevada Grenchen, the F77? I went in detail at how they innovated at that level. So again, you obviously missed that video, but I don't think that there is a big misconception about what Tissot is and their place or position in the market. I own a C-Star 2000 and wear it more than my Tudor Pelagos. Wow, great choices. You have great taste, my friend. And I rotate it with its near cousin, my Oris Aquis. Interesting cousin. He uses that, not because Oris has anything to do with that brand, but yeah, the C-Star design is very similar to the Oris Aquis. Actually, I've never really noticed that until you pointed it out. He favors his automatic PRS 516 over my Tag Heuer Formula 1. Fair enough. Look, great. I'm happy for you. If you love those watches, then enjoy them. I've said this a million times. Don't ever let anybody else's opinions about your watches or what you enjoy have any say over, you know, or diminish your enjoyment. There are plenty of watches I adore that people just look at and go, my God, that's hideous. I am slightly different. I have a very thick skin because I've been desensitized by being on YouTube for 10 years. That will happen. I'm much like the, how did Blackadder put it? I'll insert the quote here.
Cross me and you'll soon discover that under this playful, boyish exterior beats the heart of a ruthless, sadistic maniac.
do not misunderstand. This is not a personal attack on your choices. If you love your PRX, if you love your whatever, the C-Star, whatever it is, do not be offended. But I have to say this, maybe there is a part of you that doesn't fully love them, because if you truly love something, no matter what anybody says, you're gonna love it anyway. Maybe I've, what's the expression, hit a raw nerve or something. But I also have a duty, I feel, with the responsibility of the amount of subscribers I have, to report the truth, or to be as truthful as I can. And still to this day, there are certain watch brands, I'm not going to name names for obvious reasons, but they will not lend watches in. I either have to buy them or borrow them because they don't want criticism. And to me, well, what's the point? What's the point of a review? I've only ever been respectfully honest. You know, I try not to like poo-poo too much a brand. I think when criticism is deserved, then I give it. There's a reason I don't accept watches in exchange for a review. I don't do sponsored reviews. I don't, you know, there's a reason. I have to remain independent. Otherwise, what's the point? It becomes advertising then, and it will always remain so. So I have to express my concerns when companies start putting in plastics parts into movements, advertising them as one way, and that is a slippery slope, especially in today's watch world. Well, there isn't any independent watch journalism. There just isn't. They're all fronts for their own watch stores now. Oh, and by the way, check out my watch store in the comment. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. I don't have a watch store. Is Tissot a great brand? Of course they are. Their history, their heritage is undeniable. They have so many heavyweights under their belt. I love Tissot. It was my entryway into Swiss watches after all. I just wish they would do things a little bit differently and not insult the intelligence of us watch enthusiasts. I don't want the entry level to mid-range all becoming System 51 style mass production with disposable movements. There is a beauty in regulating your movement, and if you don't want to do that, that's fine, but there's a beauty in having as many of the original parts and not just modularizing it so they just chuck it away or bung a new one in it. It removes so much of the personality and the individualism, and you know, maybe my viewpoint is dated. I can't help but feeling in my heart, you know, I think about the future of watchmaking. I think about it a great deal. Do I still recommend them? Absolutely, but know what you're getting into. I've written here, I want to see the industry grow, not fail. Things are only going to get worse before they get better. You know, I'm not a person that's going to put my head in the sand and deny what's really happening with the watch industry, especially at that level. I've done videos about this. That's the first area that's going to have casualties when the crisis really, I mean, now it's, anyway, I've already talked about that at great length. So I want to say thank you to Michael. Great comment. Appreciate the support. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad. I try and respond to as many comments as I can. Obviously, I can't respond to every single one, but I really do try. So always comment, always like, and all that good stuff. It really does mean the world to me. And I appreciate this because we need to talk about this. Now, don't forget to like this video if you want to see more free and independent content like this. I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Onwards and upwards. Ciao.